Empire. Did the Seahawks show some warts? And what's up with Cam Newton and the Patriots? What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And yeah, we're going to talk about two teams on opposite coasts, both of them very intriguing. And to do so, I've enlisted the services of my good buddy Jerry Brewer of the Washington Post. We're going to talk about the Seattle Seahawks first off, because they suffered their first loss of the season. The way Russell Wilson has been playing, they look like a legit contender in the NFC. But as they lost that game to the Cardinals, we see some chinks in the armor. I want to pick that apart with Jerry Brewer. And then, as you probably know, Cam Newton and the New England Patriots had just an embarrassing outing on Sunday. Quite concerning what we saw out of Cam, out of his coaches, out of the rest of the team. And so we're going to revisit that, Jerry and I. And we're bringing it all to you right now. And here we are with my guy, Jerry Brewer, columnist of the Washington Post, coming to us from Seattle, Washington. How you doing, Brew?
I'm doing all right, man. Just hanging in there and trying to figure out this NFL season.
Yeah, it's a crazy year between not knowing if games are going to happen or if they are and when they're going to happen, but also it's some compelling and intriguing football as well. I think there's a lot of good teams out there, but I think there's also a lot of fool's gold. And I think as we start getting to that midpoint of the season, just a little beyond, a lot of that fool's gold is going to start showing itself. And one that I really have a question about is, and why I wanted to have you on, is the Seattle Seahawks, because you're up there in Seattle. You covered them for a number of years before you went to the Washington Post. And so they suffered their first loss. And as amazing as Russell Wilson has been, and he made some amazing throws in that game, he also had some struggles. And that team was not able to bail him out, as he's constantly been able to put that team on his shoulder and carry them. He needed a favor, and his defense could not return the favor. And so I just wonder about them. Hey, they're still a good team. They're in a very tough division. What do you make of the Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah, it's interesting. They're 5-1 now. They've had 4 games that were losable. And in dramatic fashion, in 3 of those, they were able to pull it out. The game that they lose was the one they probably had the most in control, leading by 10 points with 5 minutes to go. This is the worst defense by far that Pete Carroll has had since he made the Seahawks the Seahawks, since they really started to rise under him. They'll get Jamal Adams back from his groin injury, perhaps this week, if not the next week, almost certainly. But they weren't a good defense even in the couple of games that we saw with Jamal Adams on the field. And I don't know what their upside defensively is. And they're at that point where they're either going to need to make a trade to improve up front, or they're going to have to just start plucking guys off the streets and just trying to see if you can get somebody who's hungry and better than what they have, which Pete Carroll seems to be a bit reluctant to do. But that's ultimately it. Like, you can't it's great that Russell is on this pace, this Peyton Manning 2013-like pace in terms of touchdown passes, but they're putting too much on him, and he can shoulder a lot of things, and this is probably his MVP season. It's a runaway MVP start for Russell, but I think those 3 interceptions kind of showed you how you need to balance out the team. I think he's just going to have one of those special years one way or another, but every week it's not going to be we grinded out a win and we may have the best player in football on our team. That can't always be the conclusion. You got to become a more balanced team. This is not a defensive year in the NFL for a lot of reasons. So the bar on how good your defense has to be is really low. But they're not even anywhere close to that bar. It's not Dallas Cowboys bad defensively, but it seems like it's close in certain situations. They can't get a stop when they need it.
They've given up 506 yards, 464, 522, 415, 449, and 519. I don't care how good your offense is. That's not championship caliber defense right there. And like you said, they either got to pull off a trade so they can get after quarterbacks, but I don't think they can make enough trade. Like, okay, that if they get a pass rusher, that'll help them, but they still need more up front there than just one guy. One guy is not going to just magically transform this defensive front.
No, they're not going to be a good defensive front no matter what they do, unless, for some reason the Rams just said, hey, here's Aaron Donald. but even Aaron Donald would be like, man, it's hard to make anything happen on this defense. There's nobody else. But I do think some type of impact player, someone that offenses had to account for and game plan for, would help on some level. I think at times you just need a new energy as well, some better athleticism. They're not – Kyler Murray threw 48 passes in that game. He dropped back at least 50 times, no sacks. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you're playing against. Andy Dalton is going to shred a defense that can't get to him. Cam Newton, the version that we saw last week, is going to shred a defense that can't get to him. As a matter of fact, you really look at Cam's struggles this year. Who's the one team that he absolutely went off against?
Right.
Seattle. He just couldn't get him in the end zone, at the end. And overall, I think he only had one touchdown pass in that game. So they are susceptible to just about any quarterback in the league going off on them because of how they can't affect them. And I think their back end is lacking in a lot of ways, but not to the degree that we've seen where every quarterback comes in and throws for 350 yards against them. I think they can be competitive in the back end, but you got to work in conjunction on the front end. And that defensive front is just not giving them anything. And so it's the question becomes, do you try to slow the game down a little bit? Well, I think letting Russ cook has been great for them, and it's probably the reason why they have been so good this season. So I don't think you want to stop being aggressive and attacking and getting all the yards that are available to you and going back to some kind of ground and pound thing to support a defense that absolutely can't do it. But they got to figure out some way to get them to play more effectively on defense.
Is it scheme or is it personnel that's lacking right here?
I think it's a matter of both. I think their personnel leaves a lot to be desired. They're imbalanced in terms of personnel. Linebacking core with Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright, pretty good. The back end of that defense, Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams, Shaquille Griffin, our guy, Quentin Dunbar, Trey Flowers, all of that, those guys should be better than what we've seen. We have not seen their preferred starting four, in the defensive backfield play together for anything more than 70-something snaps. So they've really, in 6 games, they've only played together for basically a game of football. And there's all kinds of things on the back end that aren't going well. But they're just, can the average fan name anyone that they're starting up front? They should be able to name John Reed. I'm not sure the average fan even knows him. He's only had 1, 2, 1.5, really good seasons in the NFL. Other than that, he's more talent than great impact player. But then, after him, nobody can name these guys.
There's nobody getting to quarterback, like you said. They've got 9 sacks. That's just in the bottom quarter of the league. And then it just goes back to that. Do you think that they're regretting not re-signing Jadeveon Clowney now?
I mean, Jadeveon Clowney really isn't doing anything in the area of pass rush in Tennessee, and he's dinged up again. So I don't think they regret that.
Okay.
But it was like you needed to be able to immediately pivot to a counter. They didn't get Everson Griffin. It doesn't seem like Griffin has been anything in Dallas either. And so you can't look at that and say, oh, not getting him messed you up. You could have had an impact player. No, really you couldn't have. They should have thrown some more numbers at that a little bit in terms of guys who were legitimate, established, productive NFL players, and they just didn't. Instead, they went out and they got Adams. And some fans in Seattle seem to be, why did we go out and do that when we had this gaping hole here? And I kind of get that. I think that they've seen so little of Jamal Adams that they don't realize how good he really is. I think that he's kind of the strong safety version of Bobby Wagner in terms of an impact perennial all-pro player. He's only played 3 seasons, and it's been one of the best starts I've seen, from a defensive player in a long, long time. And I think if they can get him out on the field and get the rest of the season out of him, everyone will realize in clear terms how good he is. But there's that question of, they haven't seen enough of him, so should they have done that? They also question with Ken Norton running the defense and with Pete Carroll being kind of a traditionalist in how he maybe uses guys in a simplified scheme. Can they really get the best out of Jamal? Well, I think in the couple of games we saw Jamal in that Seattle defense, he was not bored, as Greg Williams said. Yeah. He was playing like a man with his hair on fire, and they just need things to happen more up front. But I think when he gets back, they're really going to just unleash him and see what he can do in some of their areas of deficiency. But they're just so deficient that it's hard to judge. And then we do have to talk about Ken Norton Jr., who has never, as a defensive coordinator, had a particularly outstanding defense.
Right.
And so I don't think it's necessarily his fault with this personnel, but he has not been an elevator of defenses. And so it's a really tough predicament for you to have Ken Norton Jr. in. And I think his inability to come up with something that works becomes problematic as well, mixed in with this. However, they still are a good football team overall.
Okay, so how good do you think they are compared to the rest of the division? I've already seen them lose to Arizona here. They're about to play the 49ers. They have 2 dates with the Rams, obviously 2 dates with the 49ers, 1 more with them. Where do you think that they fit in this division here?
It's still hard to know right now. I tend to give them the edge. Maybe that's the bias from knowing them. But, I look around and the Rams are pretty balanced. But they're not always a shutdown type of defense. The Niners, without Bosa for the rest of the year, Garoppolo is still turning the ball over like crazy. If it comes down to, if you can make it a fist fight between Russell Wilson and Jimmy Garoppolo, who are you going to give that to? You're going to give it to Russell more times than not. So I tend to think they'll split with the Niners, and I tend to think that they'll split with the Rams, though Carroll has had some difficulty against Sean McVay. And I tend to think they get Arizona the next time they played them. But that's 3-3 in the division?
Yeah.
Does somebody else in the division have something better than that? we'll see. I mean, I still look at Seattle and I see, considering the start that they've gotten off to, they should be able to replicate their 11-5 last year. And because Russell is playing so well, I think they might be worth one more win than that. So I look at them as a 12-4 team if they can figure out some things on defense. And I'm not sure that there's another 12-4 team in the NFC West. So I'm still going to give them the edge in the NFC West. Right now, I would say it's weird to think because they've only lost one game and they should be 6-0. I would probably put them at third in the NFC in general right now if you want to do a running power rankings. Behind Green Bay and behind Tampa Bay.
Okay.
And we'll kind of see. I mean, obviously, record-wise, same number of losses as Green Bay, and they're one game ahead of Tampa Bay in the loss column. But you look and you see what Brady's boys are really doing, and you look and you see, Aaron Rodgers has been right there all year, except for that one terrible game, and they can do more on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
In terms of matchup, I think Seattle would say we match up pretty well with both of those teams. We'd be willing to go toe-to-toe with them, but you got to get to that game. And there's a lot of other, New Orleans, don't nobody count them out.
Right.
By the end of the year, they may be the best team in the NFC. But I think a lot of people in Seattle were maybe thinking that this could just be this magical year where the Seahawks are 8-9-0, something like that before something really catches up with them. The fact that game caught up with them just makes you realize that it wasn't a phony 5-0. They did a lot of work to get there, and they got there because they have the single greatest. I wanted to say single greatest weapon in the league. I think that's Patrick Mahomes, but in terms of a weapon that's functioning at its peak, I would say it's Russell Wilson.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this guy is up there as far as passing. What's he, like sixth in the league? He's got 2 receivers in the top 10. And he's just can make anything happen. He's just like Mahomes. He's a wizard. You think that maybe you've got him, and he has a way of getting out of it and elevating his team. So yeah, I mean, I do believe that most games we don't see 3 interceptions out of him, and he takes care of the football, and they escape with victories. I just don't know if it comes down to a shootout with him and Brady. I got all the confidence in Russell, but I feel like that defense is going to let him down. And that's with Mike Evans and Godwin, and if they get Antonio Brown and can keep his nose clean. If you're going toe-to-toe with Green Bay, again, because, I think that probably unless Green Bay can add another guy, maybe a crafty slot guy by the trade deadline, I think that I'd go with Lockett and Metcalf over what Rodgers has to work with, but I give the nod to the defense. So
they got to get better. They got to get better on defense.
Yeah.
And, we've seen this before. I think in the early years when Kansas City really got going, their defense was terrible statistically. And then they started to figure some things out as the year went on. We saw that from Denver, and Peyton Manning was throwing for all those yards, and you had Von Miller injured, and they had to figure out something. They did. Peyton Manning and on the Colts with Tony Dungy, defense no good. Then all of a sudden, Bob Sanders and Tony Dungy magic, makes the Colts good enough, and they're able to make a run. We've seen the Patriots some years during their run statistically not be good on defense, but they've got a defensive mastermind leading them, and week to week on a matchup basis, they're able to come with some things that make their defense better than what it is when it gets down to playoff time. With the Seahawks, it's their use of personnel and their relentlessness that has always made them special on the defensive end, and then mixed with the fact that they had some of the all-time great defensive talent during their Legion of Boom days. This time, like, you don't ever look at it and you say, oh, well, it'll be okay because Pete's going to scheme something up on defense. Pete's not going to scheme something up on defense. Pete is going to get those guys to play as hard as they possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
The difficult thing for the Seahawks is I think they are playing as hard as they can on the defensive end, and it's just not there. And what do you do then? It's really difficult. Pete has this way of making those guys like play a game like it's a Rocky fight. And so it don't matter how many punches you're taking, they're going to keep on trying things, and they might get a turnover here or there, make a big play here or there, and that's been enough. But in pro football, you just over 16 games, that catches up with you. And everything, it feels like this week is starting to catch up with them. And they really got to come back and have a good response this week against the Niners to show people that there is some growth that is possible there. What we learned last week and then blowing the game in Arizona is that the way they were doing absolutely is not sustainable. The game has a way of teaching you lessons and pulling you back if you think that you are going to be able to survive and get further in a limited way. The game pulled them back, and now they have to respond and show that they can stay ahead of the curve. And if they can do that, I think they'll ultimately be just fine. But that's a very difficult ask when you look around and you're just like, who is going to step up on this defense?
Is there anything more craveable than the smell of McDonald's fries? If someone's hiding an order of fries, they're never hiding it well. It takes one whiff to trigger a fry craving that will only be satisfied the McDonald's way. So stand up if you would like to taste the smell of a McDonald's fry right now. Did you just stand? Because if you did, then you earned yourself a trip to the McDonald's drive-thru for your own steamy carton of crispy, golden goodness. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
You talk about needing to bounce back, and somebody else who needs to bounce back is Cam Newton and the Patriots. We talked about him, during the off season when he was looking for work. Then you and I talked again once he landed in New England. And so, what did you take away from that game on Sunday? Because Cam looked kind of lost. Belichick and McDaniels looked lost. Offensively, defensively, the team as a whole, they didn't have any counter punches. This is not what we've been used to seeing from the Patriots. And the way this thing started with Cam, it looked like, oh, wow, this might be a match made in heaven. But that magic ran out somewhere over his COVID quarantine period. And he came back, didn't look good against Denver, then looked even worse this past Sunday. What do you think is going on there?
Number one, New England's not any good.
Mm-hmm.
They're not good on the defensive side, which you thought maybe they would be, and offensively, they don't have the weapons, which we knew. I mean, Brady goes to Tampa, and all of a sudden you're like raving about the weapons he has in comparison to the team that he was on,
Mm-hmm.
and the team that he was on has made the playoffs, 50 million times in a row.
Right.
They don't have the weapons to help a quarterback out. They're not built around the quarterback in a way that's comfortable. They're going to need some kind of dynamic performance from the quarterback to make life simpler for everyone else. And Cam's not that quarterback right now. Maybe it's because of the time that he has spent off away from the game. Maybe it's the new system. Maybe he just doesn't have it anymore. I'm not sure. It was really alarming to see him just not get anything accomplished last week. And it was just, the numbers were just atrocious. But, you want to look at sample size, and we have a small size, but we got a 5-start sample for him right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've only seen one dynamic passing performance in those 5,
Right.
at Seattle, where he went off. Everything else has been pedestrian to terrible in that area. He impressed us in week 1 with his running.
Right.
And overall, I mean, he ran well against Seattle as well. He's even caught a pass this year and done all of that. So athletically, I think you see a player that is still some high percentage of what he always was, but his mind is playing tricks on him right now. He's overthinking it too much. The sad thing about it, Mike, is I just really think that Cam wants it badly this year.
Right.
I think sometimes you just got to settle down and just say, stay within yourself, really trust what this coaching staff is trying to do and see if you can get it done. Like, really slow the game down. Don't do anything to let the game get away from you, even if it means that you're throwing it out of bounds and punting it 5 straight possessions. Just keep everything simple and see if you can build something on top of that. But the way it's going right now, I don't see a player who is going to start for the rest of the year. I mean, he's going to have to show us something immediately, or else his time as a starter, at least in New England, may be over.
But how much of this, as I was looking at that game and watching and seeing just the confused kind of look on his face, like he just couldn't figure out what was going on as he's sitting there on the bench. And then I'm watching the plays that they're running. I didn't see a whole lot of creativity and adjustments from Josh McDaniels. I didn't see anything to try to help Cam get into a rhythm. Go with some quick hitters. Go with some – they don't have a tight end. They need a tight end that could help him.
Yeah.
They didn't – we saw him go to James White some, but I just felt like they were like, whoa, we're used to a quarterback kind of masking stuff and elevating, and they did not show that they know how to help that quarterback get into a rhythm, because they're used to a quarterback getting into his own rhythm and adjusting accordingly. There wasn't any of that. And so we saw the first week all kinds of creativity, all kinds of new flavor. And then they're slowly like, okay, we got his feet wet. Now take on over, Cam. I think that, and it's crazy that you're talking about this about a guy who's been in the league for 10 years now, but it is a new system. And I don't think that they can be lazy and just count on him to carry this offense with such a limited cast of receivers. I think they got to scheme it up better, because I'm telling you, if you don't scheme it up better, it's not going to get better. And if you put Cam on the bench, it's going to be even worse, because Jarrett Stidham is terrible. He's thrown 4 interceptions in 27 pass attempts. And Brian Hoyer is terrible. So your best hope is you got to scheme the heck out of this thing and help Cam get in a better rhythm.
Yeah, and it calls into question that issue with the Patriots. That's going to become even more magnified as Belichick or as Brady continues to thrive, and if the Patriots continue to struggle. Where do we draw the line between coaching innovation and player greatness? I'm always going to be on the side of player greatness. And I think people got carried away in their criticisms of Brady and saying, well, it was a system. It was a system. It was a system. The system was built around the player. Brady was the system.
Yeah.
That system worked because it had him. It had, maybe the greatest quarterback of all time running it.
Right.
And Bruce Arians' system now, it's only been 6 games or so, but it looks better than any Bruce Arians system that we've seen because Brady is the system.
Right.
And yeah, this is an interesting test for Josh McDaniel and for Bill Belichick on the other hand of, you're taking a quarterback who's rusty and who is uncomfortable, and now you're going to have to polish it for him. Everything in the NFL is about getting your quarterback comfortable and getting him in a place in which he can be productive and he can manage the game. And you feel confident in him managing the game, situations, not turning the ball over, all of that, and then you build on it, right? You just keep on and keep on building on it. They got to figure out how to do that with Newton. One thing that they're missing that Brady was just so good at, and it's real simple, and it's a point I wanted to make. Patrick Mahomes is playing the simple game well this year, just real simple. Everybody's like, you're not going to beat us over the top. You are not going to beat us over the top, and we're going to try to take away some of your pet plays with Travis Kelce. What are you going to do? And he's like, all right, well, there's that little 7-yard pass here. I'll just take it. We'll just keep on taking it. Oh, we'll run it here. I'll check, I'll check into this run. Russell Wilson, best deep ball thrower in the NFL, maybe the best deep ball thrower in the history of the NFL. And he is on fire this year. But what is Russell doing really well this year? He's playing the simple game. Let me just drop back and let me just take what's there to start it off, and let me be real accurate and real aggressive and going out and getting the yards that are there. And then we'll build everything on top of that. Brady has always been great about that in that New England Josh McDaniel system. If it's a 5-yard pass, I'm going to throw it, and I'm going to put it on the money and maybe give my guy a chance to get 8 out of it. And that's what that play demands, and that's what I'm going to get. Cam has to show an ability to do that. He has never been terrifically accurate passer. And in particular, he's never been just a great like Alex Smith, like on the spot, short game thrower. And he's got to be able to do that in this offense. I mean, that is his key.
But he's also got to have somebody.
You got to go get it. You got to go get it. And even if it's only like just inching you forward, you got to be able to make that play and give your guy a chance to potentially run after the catch.
But here's my concern. Here's my thing with that. The problem is you've got Julian Edelman, who is no longer Julian Edelman. They had a 275-pound linebacker blanketing him, could not get open to save his life. I know he's been a little gimpy, but like they don't have people who can get open, and that's why they've got to run some picks. They've got to run some screens. They've got to hit the quick slants and stuff like that because these guys are not getting open for him. And so, like you said, like Brady maybe could throw these guys open, but I think Brady saw this coming. That's why he got out. He knew that N'Keal Harry is like trash. He knew that Julian Edelman was starting to decline. I mean, he didn't have a tight end. And there's not a lot to work with right there. Jacoby Myers, not going to give you much.
That's what Cam misses more than anything is his Olsen. He doesn't have a tight end. And, they signed him late, and nobody else wanted to sign him. And so they didn't even get to have an offseason in which they knew what quarterback they were building around.
Right.
And like, if you were really going to build a team around Cam Newton, you want to have a most likely a tight end who can lead your team in receptions.
Yeah. And
you want to have big play receivers who give him a big window to throw to that can go out and go snatch it deep and all of those things. That's what they don't have. And they don't have the weapons to support a quarterback like you need.
Right.
And then schematically, they're going to have to just get off of their pet Brady stuff and figure out what their Cam stuff is. And even if that means, this might be one of those years in which your quarterback rarely even reaches 200 yards. And you're going to have to figure out how to do that. How do you do that in today's NFL, in which it's just so hard to keep a team down and keep them off the, from moving the ball and keep them, away from putting 30 points in the scoreboard? I don't know.
Well, I
But
think
the one thing that you got working to your advantage is you got no fans and you got a sterile environment.
Right.
So the things that you want to get done in terms of communicating with the quarterback, you should be able to get it done in a year like this. I'm not willing to shell the Patriots and Cam just yet. I know they're not a good team,
right.
but can they build something moving forward? I think they possibly could. I would not be surprised if they had like a 6-3 run in the second half of the year.
But they're going to have to get Cam's legs going. They've got to get the RPOs going. He is on the money when he's able to be a play action passer.
Yeah.
And on Sunday, we saw a lot of drop back passing. We didn't see a lot of that early in the year. There was a lot of running. So look, how many times Lamar Jackson go over 200 yards passing? We don't see a lot, but they find a way to rack up the yards. Yes, they have better running backs. They probably have better receivers, although I think that they need another receiver as well. But they've got to get Cam going how he feels comfortable. We know when he's running, turning that edge, lowering his shoulder, running over a linebacker, starting to smile, he starts feeling good. He starts pulling that ball and hitting somebody over the top. That's what they've got to get to, because if they don't, the alternative isn't any better.
It's so hard in the middle of the year for you to take things from other people. But yeah, they should look at Greg Roman and that pistol and some of those concepts. They should look at the things that Sean McVay in his career has done to get a quarterback feeling comfortable.
Right.
Cam is very different from Jared Goff or Kirk Cousins, but he's athletic and he's way better on the move than those guys. And McVay has been good about creating movement to make life easier on the quarterback. So him rolling out and simplifying kind of his options and those sort of things, putting it in a position in which his legs scare a defense and it creates a passing lane, or he can just take off and run. Like all of those things, they're going to have to be more thoughtful than they've ever been. And hey, look, for 20 years, you didn't have to be thoughtful. Maybe the first couple of those years
right.
As he was developing, but for the better part of 15 years, you haven't had to. So it's time, So if you had like some little ideas that you've scribbled on a crumpled up sheet of paper, or they're in a dusty hallway somewhere,
Bring them out.
Go ahead and bring them out, because you got to get that guy feeling good, and that's that. If there's one thing about Belichick, and I think Belichick likes coaching Cam.
Yeah,
I really do. I mean, you just kind of, if you're reading between the lines and you see kind of like how Cam is and whatever you can read from Belichick's poker face, I think he likes coaching this kid. I think he wants to figure it out. However, Belichick can be really ruthless when he feels like a guy can't do it.
Right.
And for him, the challenge this year is you're going to have to stay the course. Like you said, Jared Stidham is a disaster. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have to stay the course with this kid. And maybe it's not going to get you into the playoffs, but maybe whatever you're doing can help you figure out a style and a way of doing things that can create a new Patriots football, whether it's with Cam as the quarterback, which is most likely unlikely, or whether it's without.
Well, it's going to be intriguing to watch the rest of this season as they try to figure this thing out. I have kept you for quite a long time, and I appreciate your insight. As always great talking to you, whether it's on here or whether it's in person. But tell everybody where they can find you if they aren't already following you.
Yeah, you can always go to WashingtonPost.com/Brewer, Brewer. I'm on Twitter at Jerry Brewer, and I guess I'm on Instagram as well. I can't even remember my Instagram name, but you'll see the pretty face.
All right, Brewer. Thanks so much, man. I'll be talking to you in a couple weeks, I'm sure.
All right, take it easy, man.
All right, see ya.
It's going to be intriguing to see how things unfold for both of these teams there. I still think that the Seahawks have a chance to win that division, although it's very hotly contested. The Patriots, I'm very, very unsure of how things are going to wind up for them. They're in a winnable division, but they're looking up at the Bills and the Dolphins, and they looked like they had no way to figure out how to fix things. But if you know anything about Bill Belichick, it's that he's going to go back into the lab. He's going to scheme this thing up, study every weakness of his team and try to fix it, study every weakness of his opponents and try to fix it, and see if he can get his squad, because it's not just Cam. That defense was awful. And as we talked about, the offense just really is short on playmakers. But we'll see how it all unfolds. Thanks again for listening. Again, you can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. Please do me a favor, share this podcast with a friend, and I will talk to you guys next time.